on behalf of the book office in the French Institute in India, I'm very delighted to meet two publisher guests, one from Paris, Sabine Wespieser, and one from Calcutta, Naveen Kishore, for a discussion about the impact of the pandemic on their publishing work. Let me introduce you, Sabine Wespieser. Sabine, she's an independent publisher of French and foreign fiction based in Paris. She created our publishing house almost 20 years ago and develops a policy of authors. Every year, Sabine Wespieser publishes around 10 titles, and her catalog offers 160 titles among 60 authors: Yannick Lyons, Tariq Ali, Edna O'Brien, etc. And Naveen Kishore is the founder and managing director of Attaché Books, a publishing house located in Calcutta. Attaché Books are translated just about more foreign literature than any major publishing house in the world. Seagulls, it's also a famous and unique publishing school where all trainees learn the best tools to become an independent publisher. So it's really a pleasure to have both of you on Zoom. And tell me, what is your quarantine looks like in Paris and in Calcutta?
So in Paris, my quarantine is looking like work at the office, but of course without any contacts. It means everything takes much more time. Because when you work with a writer on a manuscript, it's very quick to find solutions on different points. But when you are at the phone or on Zoom, we have the proof, it's of course longer. So I'm working a lot on the books I'm going to publish for the next months, even if I delayed a lot of. I'm publishing 10 books a year. But this year I will publish, of course, less because of this crisis and because the bookshops, of course, are closed since the beginning of the quarantine and might open at mid-May. So I'm working on this. I'm also working on my new website. It was the occasion to do this with supposed spare time of the quarantine. And so it took also a lot of time to organize things for the people who work with me to get their salaries. In France, we have the chance to have, we're lucky, we have a good state policy. And so we're able to ask part of the salary to the state, but this takes, of course, a lot of time to organize. So I'm actually very busy. And
what about you, Naveen?
Yeah, it's mine is slightly different. At one level, we are in a kind of curfew lockdown. It's very strict, and so we've been at home, and we had very few hours, very short notice, almost, as you know. Within 4 hours, we were locked down, and the lockdown was extended twice. So typically, the way it's working is, yes, we're working out of our homes, but it's not correct to say that, you see, my role as publisher is one of curating a list, finding interesting books. That is obviously not something I can do while I'm here. But my editors, my colleagues, Shulandri, Bishan, all of them are working out of their homes. They were lucky they managed to take a lot of the material on their computers because, you know, to be connected with, the thing is that, like Sabine, we feel that everything, the whole book chain has got fractured because distributors are shut, the warehouses are shut. So recently they've opened on the 13th. Booksellers are shut, printers are shut. So you can get your books ready, edited, which we're doing. but you cannot actually give it for print. You can't even ship them out. In fact, before the lockdown, we had a ship waiting outside in some American city trying to, there was a shipment of books, which has just been delivered after almost 4 weeks. Booksellers in America are also shut, but they're running a kind of skeletal staff. So the Chicago warehouse, there are distributors, has just opened and they're beginning to deliver some books. But it's very slow. And, no matter what you say, online book sales, however rosy a picture a newspaper article may paint, is not a way of replacing the real revenue that we depend on, right? But we're being patient because we don't know how this will end, in the sense that I personally don't think that it will ever end. It's here for the rest of our lives to be with us. It might retreat into the margins, into the shadows. Occasionally, it will raise its head. But for us to really begin the real work beyond, we're making offers digitally, we're having meetings, we're announcing free downloads, we're reading poetry, all of that is fine. But ultimately, we will, in the real world, need to function with each other. I will need Sabine to be open, and I will need XYZ in America to be open, and in Germany to be open, so that in some small way we can start circulating at the same time, not with one country open and the other shut. So it's a kind of, but otherwise, yeah, your dailiness is made up of housework and a bit of other work and lots of reading when you can read. Sometimes it's difficult to read because of the anxiety between the manuscripts and the other books. So there's a lot of that. So it's that sort of thing.
Coming back to what both of you said before, Sabine, you said that you work on your to improve your website, and Naveen, you mentioned digital materials. Does it mean for both of you that you you sell more ebooks, or not really? Is it time for selling more ebooks? And if yes, which kind of ebooks? Is it literature? Is it self-control?
For me, it will only be literature, as I'm only publishing literature. So I have no choice, and actually I didn't digitalize so much. So till today I publish 10 books a year. It means 190 almost. And I have only 30 books who are digitalized because of technical problems, etc. And because I never focused on that, because I need booksellers to sell my books. As every publisher of literature and what is called high-level literary fiction, this means that you need readers who give advices to real people coming in their bookshops, etc. So for the 30 of the books I digitalized, yes, the sales are a little bit better. I would say plus 30 or 40%, but it's nothing in the, of course, in the usual turnover. Usually the turnover of digital books for me is less than 1%. So you can imagine the huge loss of turnover. There is no compensation for digital. Yeah. What about you?
I would tend to sort of agree with this because so there's two kinds of digital. One is the ebook, where we consciously, if I take a book from Sabine, I translate it, I put it up simultaneously as both an ebook and a physical book. In which case, I probably, because of the serious nature of the books, I would sell maybe 1-2%, as she says, 3%, unless it wins a Nobel, then it would go up to 30%. But there is never enough revenue for publishers like us, or most publishers, to survive only of the ebook. But the digital platform also allows existing physical stocks that are lying in different bookstores, where the bookstores are working with minimal staff to pack and ship to customers who are trying to support bookstores by buying these books. So some of that is happening, but it's nowhere at all near supporting any revenue, because you have to understand in all our publishing reality, and Sabine can enlighten us on this, we live, we are not the kind of people who will have lots of reserve funds available. We all our money is in the books themselves, right? So the books have to physically uh, move. They have to be bought, they have to be read. So the digital, when I was talking the digital, I was meaning other kinds of activity. Now, there are two things happening. One is there is this mad fashionable rush to the digital. Other than we are doing it ourselves, having conferences, having theater pieces, music, live discussions, festivals, everything is moving online. I'm a little nervous of this. I think we need to step back. I think we need to sort of think what is, everybody keeps talking about the kind of world that is going to change. We don't know. We have to wait. It's like an earthquake. When the pieces fall in different places, you have to find who is under what piece of debris. So I'm trying to advocate to my orbit of friends that we need to wait. We have to be patient and calm, as difficult as it is, to first identify the damage of the pieces, then start to stitch it together or repair it. So yeah, the digital is a technological convenience, but it is not going to replace what Sabine does and what I do.
And I would say, obviously, that people who don't read real and physical books won't read digital books. That's certainly true.
Yeah.
I think we do agree with that. And another thing with books online, I'm very reluctant to that, because in France, at the beginning of this internet wonder, everything was free online, and it was very difficult for the newspapers, who didn't begin to ask their customers to pay something for the digital, for the web, the web newspaper, to have the same models than, for instance, the New York Times or the Guardian, who since the beginning asked people to pay for the web. And now in France, a lot of publishers are giving ebooks every day, etc. But I think it's a little bit dangerous, because it would be dangerous for us and for the writers, who need to be paid for their work and to need to receive their fees, that people get the habit not to pay books. So it's also dangerous for me.
Yeah. Do you agree, Naveen?
Well, I've actually been guilty of doing the same thing, which is we found that the books were not getting anywhere. The warehouses were shut, the booksellers were shut. So what we announced was that we would allow people to download one free PDF onto any computer, not like an ebook, but like literally a PDF. And till such time as we started, and now 10 days into these downloads, we found that the warehouse is open. So we started a campaign saying, those of you who've been getting this, start to also support us by buying the physical books. And we've noticed, for all it's worth, for people who like to do this kind of mathematics, within about 10 days, we've had 28,000 people visit our website. And now we want to see how much of that is actually translated into sales, which we hope to get from Chicago, because Chicago does all our deliveries. You click on our website, you place it in a shopping cart, and these are not ebooks, these are physical books. And now that Chicago is opened, in the UK and USA, we can actually deliver free books. Deliver these sales books. We can't in India. In India, we're waiting, we're getting orders. But because people are being very supportive, so they're ordering the books. But the problem is becoming, we can't deliver because we can't ship, right? We can't pack, the offices are shut. But UK and USA, on the 13th, we've begun to start doing it. So I will know at the end of the month whether in fact this campaign has worked or not. But I tend to agree that in the long run, obviously, you expect people to pay for the books. You owe it to everybody.
Thank you so much. And I wanted also to ask you, because this dark moment, it's also an extraordinary opportunity to read because we have time. So for publishers, for translators, for readers, it's a very important moment to take time to read and to discover a new title. So what kind of books do you read, not necessarily for publishing, but for yourself as an answer to the crisis?
To be frank, at the very beginning of the quarantine, I just said to myself, it's a good occasion to reread Proust from the beginning. So I began Du côté de chez Swann, but I realized quickly that I won't have time to do that because during the quarantine, of course, we have time to read, but the writers have time to write too. And after 15 days, I received a lot of new manuscript, and I was very happy about that because the manuscript of writers I'm publishing who just were able to finish earlier the book they had just begun a long time ago, and because they work, because they teach, because anyway, they didn't have time to write. So this is one thing. And so instead of reading Proust, to be frank, when I've finished with my manuscript, books to publish and to edit, etc., I'm reading crime fiction. Much work during the day and evenings to work on my own manuscript.
You don't reread La Peste de Camus?
No, not at all.
What about you, Naveen?
I mean, I personally find it that I was always reading much more before the quarantine than I am during the quarantine. I mean, I'm reading some poetry and I'm reading some nonfiction and I'm reading some fiction, but I find that my focus, even when I shifted to actual manuscripts that I enjoy reading, I find it difficult because I can no longer have printouts at hand, which I used to in the office. But the reading somehow is no longer relaxed. There is a kind of controlled sort of anxiety of a certain kind. So I'm not relaxed. I need to be relaxed to be able to read. And so I find I'm actually reading much less. I'm reading, but it's not giving the same sort of pleasure and time that I used to do. But but there's a lot else to do. I find that between the work that you do at home, and also remember that I'm in touch because of the way I function with, as she says, Sabine, that there are these authors, there are translators, there's just a world of publishing that one is constantly in touch with, and you find you're writing much more, both in terms of communication and also because I write for myself every day. There's a lot more writing happening, which is interesting, and also a lot of conversations through letters about the times like we're having now.
Sure.
Yeah. So even if we don't know already the impact of this crisis, but do you have an idea of the impact of the lockdown on all the French and Indian publishing industry? If we try to imagine the impact.
It's very difficult, and I was very pessimistic till last week. I thought we would lose readers with this quarantine after the beginning of new life. Naveen is right, because I think it will never be like before. But last week, a lot of French booksellers decided to begin a little bit to work again. That means they take the orders on the net and they deliver in front of their doors to the readers who come and collect, the click and collect system. And during this weekend, I have 5 or 6 booksellers, French booksellers, who called and said, we are exhausted. The response of the readers is fantastic. Our problem now is that the distributor is closed and that our shops will be empty soon because people are here. And this was a kind of light of hope for me, because sometimes when you are alone working on your books, on what we see, I had the feeling that my publishing house was just lost in the Triangle of Bermuda, that it won't exist anymore for people, just for me or for my writers, etc. And this was a very good sign. So I hope when bookshops will be able to open again, that the readers will really be here and buy books and have this desire of finding new books again and contemporary fiction again. I hope so.
Yeah, I tend to agree with everything that you say, because we also feel, I've said this from the very beginning, because I found around me, including major publishers in France who we have friends in and who have been impacted by, some who are saying work 3 days at home, 2 days, no salary, all these things are happening already. My point is that the bigger companies seem to have a kind of futuristic mathematics to be able to calculate through algorithms that if we get rid of 20 people or 60 people or 10 people, we can do this. People like us cannot do this. We cannot afford even think in these lines. And so I feel that it's negative energy. We have to think about when this has retreated a little and we are functioning again, I keep repeating, that is the time for us to take stock. Meanwhile, we know that people will not stop reading. If anything, they will have, it's like you miss something. It is a very, books inhabit us. It's almost like they're part of us. So when we start to miss them, today we're lucky that some booksellers are delivering in some ways. They're giving it when you drive up. They're handing it to you outside. Some are mailing it if the mail system is working. But I think the worry is not that the books will not sell. The books will sell. The worry is a different one. We have to have the economic strength to keep producing those delayed books, to keep, because it's a 24/7 chain. The distributor needs the books at a certain time, all of that. One whole season will probably have been lost. Maybe 2 seasons will be lost before we catch up. We may have to decide that instead of doing 20 books in 6 months, you may be doing 8 or 6 or 10. So a lot of this sitting here today and projecting into the future is not certainly the style of the way we work. We want to give it attention. It doesn't mean that we are not prepared. We can be prepared only so much. We cannot anticipate what is going to happen. We know that, for example, I know that I can survive, let us say, for a year, if nothing else was happening. After that, what? So that thinking is a parallel exercise once we start. But there's a lot of hope. There's no question of the books not happening. There is just anxiety at what I keep using the word fracturing, at the hurt that is caused. And fracture doesn't mean it doesn't heal. And there will be different ways of healing. I'm sure we will think of ways, if Sabine and I are forced into sitting down for the next 2 hours and planning a master plan of how we can work with each other, we may come up with a very wonderful way of working together. And also remember that there's no such thing as Indo-French great publishing trade. It's insignificant in some ways, because we are unusual. We work with each other in a certain way. It's not a vast quantum, right? So I think the translations will happen. I think that the roles that the 3 of us play in our professional capacities will be strengthened with much more understanding. That's what I feel.
Yeah,
I
sure.
do agree with that, and I could just add that I hope that this crisis will help to get rid of this overproduction. I think the big groups already decided to publish less because they realized that they can't go. Before the crisis, we all said, and remember, Naveen, we had this discussion when I was in Calcutta. It's impossible to go on like that in publishing industry because the books, there are much more books every day, every month, every year, and they sell less and less and less. So I hope the groups will understand they have to work like us, like we work. That means selecting very hardly, being very aware of what we publish, and being really able to promote the books, not just publish books, to publish them and to pay the salaries at the end. So let's hope.
It'll happen. It'll happen.
Um,
Also, all the wonderful activity that happens around books with using, flesh and blood authors and translators and people who talk books. I think a lot more of that will happen beyond the digital.
Yeah, definitely. But again, in terms of publishing market and in terms of literary season, because as you know, Naveen, in France, the big season of literature is September with Rentrée littéraire. So I was wondering, Sabine, if this year, how could you imagine what do you expect? Sorry, for September, because it's every year it's like an avalanche of titles. You have more every year, more and more first novel or 500, more than 500 titles. What about this year, especially?
I can say that for me it won't change a lot because I always publish very few books. This year, for instance, I've at the beginning of the year I decided to publish 3 books in August and September. I will only publish 2, and one of them is a wonderful Naveen new novel by Diane Meur, as you are publishing her in English. So, I always publish very few books. But what I hope is, and I think it will be reality, is that the big groups already, I know it's the case for Gallimard, it's the case for Hachette, they already decided to split their production and publish really less books. So I hope so. I hope it won't be an avalanche, because the point is that the books who were supposed to be published in April or May might come out in June if everything is like the government projects. That means slow reopening from mid-May. But I already decided to publish the book I planned for April and June, and to delay later in the year, October and November, the one I decided to publish in May, because we really have to be reasonable. Because for the booksellers, it's just impossible to open and get new books. And we had agreements between the trade unions, the trade union of publishers in France and the trade union of booksellers. The booksellers accepted to sell what they have in their shops. That means the January, February, and March books. If we publishers don't sell new books before the beginning of June. So, and this is a very fair deal, I think, because the booksellers have the same problems with funding, with money, and they really and we don't need them to send back the books we published beginning of March, who had 10 days life in the bookshops, which is just terrible for the writers.
Mm.
Yeah, that's pretty much the scenario, in the sense that the beginning of the year, the few months, or rather, let us say books that we published from November, December, January, February, which were delivered and which were then sent out as advance orders, those, as they will carry on as long as their stocks last. Everything else, we've delayed to August. Again, everything that was meant for March, April, May, June, July has been delayed to October to January.
Okay.
Now, our distributors feel that they may be functioning very well from August, but we didn't want to take that chance of overburdening the system, because booksellers have credit periods. They're not ordering just now because the meter will start ticking, right? So they have to get to some degree of comfortable flow.
Mm.
We have to realize that we will suddenly, our revenue chain has broken. We get paid every month from Chicago, right? We got paid this month as a residue of the last one. But from the month of May, June, July, I have no idea. It may just dry up because we get paid against collections, what they collect, right? So you may be owed X hundred in the market, but when you're not able to collect from the booksellers, you can't give it on. So we have to therefore depend on our own resources for looking after the human resource, which is our colleagues and our vendors and our translators. And we have to then juggle to do some books which are absolutely, for example, we are publishing a book by the Nobel winner, Austrian writer, Elfriede Jelinek, which is based on Donald Trump, the emperor. It's a very, very political 200-page monologue. And we want that out. So that is being printed as we speak in America at this moment, so that during the election, that becomes an important book. So you choose what you wish to bring forward, what you want to keep for later, to give the system a little bit of chance to start opening its bandages and flexing its muscles and start walking.
So I don't know if you work from your office or if you work from home, Naveen, because I know in Delhi or in Calcutta, the
Home.
oh, home, okay, because the curfew and the lockdown is strict compared
Very
to,
strict.
even in Paris it's strict, but you allowed to go to the office if it's free. So I just wanted to ask to ask you, both of you, what do you see from your window?
I'm at home and I see the jasmine in blossom in my little Parisian yard, which is just exceptional because the weather was never so wonderful than since the beginning of the quarantine. This is ironical, but anyway, I see flowers.
And it's also very green from Naveen's home. Yeah, we can see. That's wonderful.
We see a lot of green around, but we hear a lot of birds now.
Yes. Yeah. You can imagine, I live in Nizamuddin and I have an amazing view on the dome of Humayun tomb, and it's just the revenge of birds, crows, and monkeys.
Oh yes, Delhi has a lot of monkeys.
Yeah. And they appreciate this quarantine.
Yes, I know. Certainly the human ones are everywhere.
Yeah, but it's maybe a new balance between animals and humans. I don't know. Okay, thank you so much, Sabine Wespieser. Thank you so much, Naveen Kishore. I hope we will see you soon in the coming weeks, months, or Zoom e-meeting. And thank you for your time, and sorry for the technical problem
it's okay.
at the beginning, but it was very nice to hear your voices and to see you, and hope that we will have more creativity and more opportunities to think about how to work better together. So
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Sabine.
Thank you, Naveen. Bye-bye.
have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.